Hello everybody, welcome to my channel if you're new here. Welcome back if you're a returning guest. My name is Brittany, and on this channel I share my stupid opinions about books that I've read. I do follow the cawpile review method, which was created by G over at Book Roast. Without further ado, let's give my stupid opinion on the book that we're talking about today, which is The Hiding Place by C.J. Tudor. I've read one C.J. Tudor book in the past. It was The Chalk Man, and I very much enjoyed that book. It's one I picked up from a book outlet haul several years back, and it's just been sitting on my shelf since. We're following Joe Thorne, who never wanted to return to his hometown, but return he must after he receives a mysterious email from someone in his hometown saying, "I know what happened to your sister. It's happening again." So Joe's coming back to kind of settle old scores. We're following him in present day, but also going back to 1992 when his sister goes missing and all kinds of crazy stuff goes down. So returning to his hometown is both easy and difficult. Easy in the sense that he kind of has everything set up to go. He has a job, he has a place to stay, but it's tough because he's made enemies, and so he's going to have to avoid those enemies and make it through what's going on in his hometown. The hardest part for him is going to be returning to the old abandoned mine that changed his life forever, and finally confronting the horrifying secrets that his hometown is like harboring. For Joe, the day that his sister went missing was not the worst day of his life. It was the day she came back. Bottom line up front, this book reminded me so much of Pet Sematary by Stephen King, and it also reminded me a lot of the Netflix series Dark. If you've seen that and you've read this book, that will make sense. I just couldn't help but think of that show as I was reading this book, but so much of what happens is very similar to the plot of Pet Sematary. So let's go ahead and get into it. For the characters, I gave it a 7 out of 10. Joe Thorne was the original sassy man of 2019 when this book was published. He was the sassy man before sassy men became all the rage. He reminds me so much of Chandler Bing in Friends, with the constantly being ready with a sarcastic comment. He had me laughing out loud at certain points, and I really enjoyed his character. I also really enjoyed his Irish friend and roomie, Brendan. He's very quick with them, my mommy always said, and I really found that to be an endearing quality in a character. I didn't like the twist at the end with Brendan's character. We're gonna keep in mind that. I didn't find the side characters to be nearly as interesting as Joe, and I wouldn't say that Joe himself was a particularly interesting character. He smokes, he drinks, he gambles, he teaches high school English. I mean, we all have one of those teachers. He may or may not have been romantically interested in Beth, who is like the newish art teacher at Arnhill Academy. Her only defining characteristic was like she dressed like an emo kid from the 2000s, which I love that for her, but I couldn't tell you a single other thing about her. We also have a woman hitman. Gloria is sent by her boss, the fat man, to shake Joe down for about $30,000 that he owes for past gambling debts. Joe's not exactly the best at gambling, but that's like the general idea. Gloria's an ex-gymnast, and she's like apparently really strong, and Joe's absolutely fucking terrified of her, and I love that for all women, to be honest with you. Other side characters were so underdeveloped that I just couldn't even name names. Like even ones that are central to the plot of this book, couldn't name names. Joe's nemesis was named like Hurst or something like that, and I forget what his first name was. He has a son who's also a student at Joe's school, whose name I really don't remember. Joe's sister Annie is like an integral part of this book, especially in flashbacks, but even she's not like fully fleshed out, which if you're gonna have a character be integral to the plot, it's kind of important for me to know stuff about her. You get a picture of who Annie is before the incident happens that kind of changes her, but because you don't have enough of her to really go off of, you can't really see how the changes, you know? You can't tell the change. Overall, I would say it was pretty decently thought out, but the ending, the twist with Brendan, I just hated that. 7 out of 10 for characters. All right, for the atmosphere, we are set in a very small town in England, and that absolutely showed. The community is very tight-knit, and no matter where Joe goes or who he bumps into, they always want to know, why are you staying at at the Morton cottage, and they always point out how weird it is. No one really cares that Joe's basically this prodigal son coming to return to avenge his sister. And it really, really reminded me of my own small town. Like if I were there visiting, they'd be like, oh, so why aren't you staying at your parents' house? And then once again, I noted in the atmosphere that it felt very much like Dark, very similar in that only a few of the townspeople know what's happening in the mine. And I really enjoyed the feel of this book, largely, again, in part to the narrator, because I double dorked this book too. The atmosphere was a 7 out of 10, and we're moving on to writing. I think that CJ Tudor is very, very good at writing, and I really love the style used in this. There's really nothing that I have to complain about in regards to the writing in this book, except for my copy of the book was published in America. And so while I was reading along with the audiobook in my physical book, there were whole lines missing from the book or words that didn't match up. I'm not taking away points from that. Like in writing, it's just something that was interesting to note for me. And I did find myself zoning out at certain points, which to me indicated that there were pieces of writing in here that didn't necessarily need to be in and felt a little bit more like filler. For the writing, I gave it an 8 out of 10. Plot was also an 8 out of 10. It felt very gripping, but so similar to Pet Sematary. The pacing was a little too slow for my liking, and the ending was extremely neatly tied up. If you like that, great. There were no loose ends, but I don't feel like I'm left pondering what's gonna happen next or wondering what happens with the characters for years to come after. If you've read Pet Sematary or watch Dark, you'll probably enjoy this book, or on the flip side, you'll completely hate it. Twists for me in the plot were not really so shocking, and I did find myself kind of rolling my eyes at certain points, so you can take with that what you will. Plot was an 8 out of 10, like I said. For intrigue, like I've pointed out, I was double dorking, and I did find myself glossing over certain parts or zoning out, and I think that that also kind of speaks volumes for the intrigue. I did put the book down and only listen to the audiobook when I was cooking, and I found myself kind of getting lost. I was not so disinterested that I felt the need to DNF, but I wasn't so interested that I felt like I couldn't stop reading. So for that, I gave it a little bit higher than an average score for intrigue with a 7. Joe's decisions made sense for Joe's character, but I can't say the same for the other characters because they weren't as developed as I would like. I don't think that Brendan's decisions were very logical, so we're talking about logic here. He was painted to be far too smart for how dumb of decisions he made. So for logic in this book, I said 7 out of 10, and the same can be said for my enjoyment, 7 out of 10. Similar to intrigue, I wasn't having the best time of my life. I also wasn't having the absolute worst time of my life. I kept thinking about Dark and how I might want to rewatch the show while I was reading this book, so it wasn't all bad. I did say 7 out of 10 for enjoyment for this as well, which puts our overall score for The Hiding Place at 51 out of 70, averaging that down to 7.28, which is 3.75 stars on my little cawpile rating scale. So yeah, that's that. If you have different opinions than me, please feel free to leave me a comment. If you like the video, like the video. If you are new here, please feel free to subscribe, and I will see you all in my next video.